In the blistering heat of the desert, where the horizon stretched endlessly and whispers of war lingered in the dust, one rancher thought himself untouchable. With a laugh that echoed across the land, he mocked the might of the Apache people, daring anyone to challenge them for his sprawling ranch. To him, it was just a cruel joke, a display of arrogance before his peers. But what he didn't know was that a single cowboy, hardened by struggle, guided by justice, and unafraid of the truth, was about to rise. And the rancher's pride? It wouldn't survive the encounter. The rancher was a man of wealth and influence, his land stretching wider than the eye could see. He built his empire on cattle, sweat, and intimidation. Around town, his voice carried like thunder, his presence demanding both fear and obedience. Yet behind his power was a cruelty that fed on humiliation. He saw the Apache people not as human beings, but as obstacles in his pursuit of more land, more control, more dominance. The town itself lived in quiet fear. Whispers of raids, disputes over stolen land, and the heavy hand of injustice were part of daily life. The Apache tribes had been pushed farther and farther, their hunting grounds stripped, their traditions mocked. Still, they endured with resilience, unwilling to vanish beneath the boot of men like the rancher. It was during a gathering, a celebration of his success, that the rancher made his infamous challenge. With laughter dripping from his lips, he declared that whoever could tame the Apache warriors would inherit his vast ranch. The crowd chuckled nervously, some joining in, others glancing away in shame. For them, it was entertainment. For the Apache, it was another insult carved into a long history of wounds. But one figure in that crowd didn't laugh. A cowboy, weathered by long rides and silent battles, heard the words and felt the injustice burn within him. He wasn't a man of many words, but his silence carried weight. Where others saw only the rancher's pride, he saw an opportunity to remind the world that arrogance has a price, and justice, even in the quietest hands, can roar louder than any laugh. The days that followed carried the weight of that challenge. The town couldn't stop talking about it. Some dismissed it as drunken bravado, while others whispered that the rancher had gone too far. To openly mock the Apache, proud warriors who had fought for generations to protect their land, was not only reckless, it was dangerous. The Apache themselves heard of the insult. Among their people, strength was not measured in boasts or wealth, but in endurance, honor, and the spirit of their ancestors. The rancher's words cut deep, not because they believed in his challenge, but because they reflected the arrogance of settlers who thought their power infinite. The cowboy, meanwhile, rode the edge of town. He was no stranger to the land or its scars. He had seen injustice firsthand, treaties broken, families torn apart, blood spilled for property lines that shifted like sand. He was neither Apache nor rancher, but he carried within him a conviction that no man had the right to mock another's existence. As word spread, tension thickened. The rancher continued to boast, certain that no one would dare confront him. His pride grew, feeding off the silence of those too afraid to speak. But the cowboy's silence was not fear, it was patience. One evening, as the sun bled red over the desert sky, the cowboy rode into the rancher's gathering. The crowd stilled, sensing that something was about to unfold. The rancher smirked, confident in his authority. Yet there was something in the cowboy's steady posture, in the unyielding set of his eyes, that unsettled even the boldest onlookers. This wasn't about claiming land, it wasn't about rewards, it was about dignity, and the cowboy was prepared to risk everything to defend it. The moment arrived like a storm breaking over dry plains. The rancher repeated his challenge, his voice loud and mocking. The crowd half cheered, half cringed. But this time the cowboy stepped forward. Without raising his voice, without brandishing a weapon, he stood before the rancher, embodying a strength the rancher could never understand. In that silence, the crowd leaned closer, hearts pounding. The cowboy's presence was not about violence, it was about truth. He represented every injustice the rancher had laughed at, every insult hurled at the Apache, every broken promise buried in the dust. His defiance wasn't in words, but in the audacity to stand against arrogance unflinching. The rancher faltered. His laughter, once booming, cracked at the edges. He had built his reputation on intimidation, but now, faced with a man who could not be cowed, his pride collapsed under its own weight. The people who once laughed with him now watched in silence, their admiration shifting toward the lone cowboy who refused to bow. That night, the rancher's challenge was silenced. Not with fists, not with blood, but with dignity. The cowboy had taken the power of arrogance and turned it back upon itself. The story spread beyond the ranch, beyond the town. It became a tale retold in hushed voices around campfires and in the homes of those who longed for justice. The rancher, once the loudest voice, faded into quiet shame. His land remained, but his pride was gone, stripped not by force but by truth. For the Apache, the moment was more than symbolic. It was proof that even in a world stacked against them, arrogance could be shattered. Though their struggles continued, they knew that dignity had found an ally in the most unlikely of places. A cowboy with no wealth, no power, but an unshakable resolve. And for the cowboy, there was no glory, no reward. He returned to the horizon, to the endless road that had shaped him. But his silence lingered, a reminder that courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it stands quietly, unyielding, until pride itself bows down. This was not just a story of a rancher and a cowboy. It was a reflection of a deeper truth. When injustice mocks dignity, it will one day meet its reckoning. Pride may laugh, but justice never forgets. So, the question remains, in a world still haunted by arrogance and division, who will be the next to stand, silent yet unshakable against the laughter of the powerful?